startups in different fields: robotics for fish farming, AI and machine learning to optimize public transport, deepfake detection, underwater communication for defense, super slippery nano coatings, and also producing clean energy from hydrogen antimatter. So that's enough for 5 lives.
I knew from I was 12, 13 years old that I wanted to do business. This was kind of my passion. I founded my first company when I was 22. So I always liked math and physics, but my take on this was that it's actually on the business side that the key missing pieces are. There are so many great people around there that have these inventions, but nothing happens. For so many reasons, these products or these inventions are not coming to market. And that is the real challenge, more than actually the science behind. Why do some entrepreneurs succeed, and what is the common mindset that they have that make them succeed? So basically, what do the best ones do better? One of the key things is really that it's a team play. And a success in a startup, it's defined by the first 4 or 5 people you actually get on board in your startup, which of course means your co-founders but also investors actually. Choose your ecosystem and your co-founders and investors with a lot of care. One of the questions I had was like, why do surfaces get dirty? Well, it's such a stupid problem, like, you know, but we're so accustomed to this. Like, that's how the world is supposed to be, right? But why? And this was back in 2019, and I met Dr. Kingsley Eve, who has a PhD in material science and specialty in nanotech. And I started throwing these questions at him, and it's like, yeah, but it's because we're using the wrong chemistry. And that was kind of the start of Nanize in 2019. 6 months later, Kingsley was able to produce evidence that we had the most slippery coating in the world. And so the lowest coefficient of friction ever for any coatings. And the current record holder is Guinness World Records is a product developed by NASA. If you start to think about sort of where are functional coatings, and they're basically everywhere. And your car, or you have airplanes, or you have on glasses, on windows, on solar panels, they're really everywhere. So we take these things for granted, and we don't sort of think about these as sort of problems, because this is just how the way the world is. We're kind of biased because we're used to this being a natural problem. Who kind of ask about these problems? They're silly problems, right? But they're not silly. They're actually huge, huge problems. There's no lack of worthy problems. But still, I see and I find that a lot of entrepreneurs are solving kind of tiny problems or unimportant problems. Every problem has an opportunity. It's by design. It's a problem. If it's a big problem, it's much better to work with it than if it's a tiny problem. So the biggest problems also have the biggest opportunities. It's really, really linked.
Who was your favorite inventor when you were a kid or a teenager? Whom did you like the most?
It was Albert Einstein. It was Graham Bell. It was Edison. All these are sort of big disruptors in our history, looking at their lives and their thinking and their mindset and what they went through. And that is kind of like a common thing that I realized also that right after their big discoveries, absolutely no one of these were appraised.
This is sad.
But what was common? Well, they got a lot of opposition. So where should you find the geniuses of today? Among the appraised ones, or among those who have a lot of opposition? Well, to me, that answer is obvious. You need to find these people that actually are opposed, and that's where you will find the next geniuses. And I think I happen to work with a few of them.
Here.
Hello, nice to meet you, Maria.
Nice to meet you too. So first of all, I wanted to compliment you on your amazing entrepreneurial journey, because you founded several deep tech startups in different fields: robotics for fish farming, AI and machine learning to optimize public transport, deepfake detection, underwater communication for defense, super slippery nano coatings, and we will talk about it in detail, and also producing clean energy from hydrogen antimatter. So that's enough for 5 lives. And I want to ask you, how did you become an entrepreneur?
So this really goes back to the early days of life. My father was an entrepreneur, and I think the mindset we get as kids is very important to our own thoughts and our own ambitions and what we want to do when we grow up and stuff like that. So for me, it was kind of very natural to talk about entrepreneurship, founding a business, wanting to understand sort of the business side of things. I knew from I was, probably 12, 13 years old that I wanted to do business. This was kind of my passion. So when I was 20, I went to do a Master of Business and Economics, and I completed this, 19 actually. And I completed this when I was 22. And then I founded my first company when I was 22. But sort of all of this really started in the early days. And even though I liked the business side, I'm also quite nerdy about technology. And like from I was a little kid, I read popular science. I loved it, about all these inventions, about these great scientists. My mother used to read the sort of the history of these great scientists, and that was Einstein, Newton, and Tesla, and all of them. And I was just very, very fascinated.
But why didn't you become a scientist then and became a businessman?
So I always liked math and physics, but my take on this was that it's actually on the business side that the key missing pieces are. Like, you have to commercialize these technologies. You need to understand them. But there are so many great people around there that have these inventions, but nothing happens. For so many reasons, these products or these inventions are not coming to market. And that is the real challenge, more than actually the science behind. So this became my passion and my interest, like what are worthy problems to actually solve? And you need to start with that instead of starting with what is a great invention. And most people start in the wrong way. They look at an invention and say, oh, this is great, let's find a business case for it. But I think you really need to dig deep, and you need to understand the problem at the core. And isn't that a worthy problem to be solving? And for me, this is where a lot of entrepreneurs make huge mistakes. They're solving non-important problems or fluffy tech or whatever. So I wanted to do the sort of hardware today, what we call deep tech. And yeah, my journey was, first I was working in software, and we had some cool algorithms and stuff. And then that company went broke after a few years, even though we had a great product and we had some funding and we had a lot of fun. We had a global customer in eBay, and we thought we really hit the golden bird, and everything looked good. And then things unfolded in an unexpected way, and the investors drew out from the due diligence. They didn't want to fund anyway, and I had too much cost, and so I had to slaughter the company, and it went bankrupt. And so that was when I was 25, which is like 20 years ago now. I'm 45. So I kind of got some of these experiences from very early on, both mistakes and sort of things, where you can learn a lot. So I don't see sort of mistakes as something to be ashamed of. You always try to do your best, and sometimes you have to learn the hard way. But out from that comes also extremely valuable insights and what not to do in the next setup. So by these type of iterations, and by being out there in the game and being a founder and a serial entrepreneur, you really get up the learning curve very fast, and you just learn much quicker. So my second startup was in solar, and this is where I had the idea. It was sort of using algorithms and lasers to fix a big problem for solar cells, which is like shunted solar cells. So you have a short circuit in the actual silicon wafer, or turned into a solar cell, and you had a short circuit. And this could be identified with heat maps, and you could use a laser algorithm to use a laser to scribe around these heat points. And by this, you can convert a B-class solar cell into a fully functional solar cell with very high performance. And I took that to sort of proof of concept. Well, we ended up raising 100 million euros in capital for this, in sort of investors and grants and some loans. And took this from 0 to 180 employees. I went through a few restructurings and built a 35 million euro business that was, at its peak, was very profitable. And then came the solar collapse, and China took over this industry and wiped out all the players in Europe. And it was a nightmare. So ups and downs, and we decided to close the company in 2015. We're basically one of the last few standings in Europe in solar, and it's very hard to compete in this setting where competition has access to free capital, and we didn't. We needed investors. So we were flooded out with all this free capital that was accessible to the Chinese players, and they were selling below cash cost. And this is more or less what they're doing actually in the battery industry today. It's exactly the same recipe. They're selling below cash cost, making it extremely hard for all the European and global players to actually compete. So that was also part of my history. And then in 2015, after this closing, I was wondering sort of what should I be doing with my life now? And I was looking into a lot of different things, and I started 2 companies, and both of them I made an exit in 2018, and so 2 exits. And after that, I sort of had the financial means to do all the crazy cool things that I'm doing now. So yeah, it's for the hard stuff, the deep tech side. It takes time to mature the things. You need to understand the science. You need to understand what's actually going on there. And again, is it a worthy problem? So you need sort of a match of all these things. And in addition, of course, you need good people, really good people, and you need to take out sort of all the bad people from the equation, the negative energy people. And unfortunately, there are a lot of those people as well. And they can completely drain you from what you're trying to do. And yeah, now I'm very conscious about this one. So I don't want to invite any of these sort of bad people with the wrong type of motivation. And that is usually power, fame, glory, or money. That is their motivation. And if that is the only thing that is motivating you, you're probably not part of my team or a part of my inner circle, because this is about doing some good stuff that is really cool, and you can't have like short-term wins here. It's a long play, and yeah, it's not about the end goal. It's about doing all these things that are really, really cool, and it's about the journey. And more than sort of becoming rich or anything, it's doing something meaningful that, yeah, where you really love to do the stuff you're doing. And that's actually the situation. I really love what I'm doing. And I feel very fortunate that I'm able to do all these crazy cool things. So this is sort of a short intro. I bet you have a lot of questions still, huh?
Oh, yes. I should have written them down while you were speaking. So first of all, I talked to many scientists who are on the research side, and I completely agree with you that the problem with commercializing the technology exists, and it's really, really hard to bring a new invention from academia to the market. And especially it's hard for hardware, for deep tech, because it's very capital intense. I would say it requires a lot of time, and you also have China and US, breathing in your back. So why do you think there are so little people and ventures who are actually trying to build this kind of companies by coupling a brilliant technology with business expertise, because it looks like a union made in heaven?
Yeah, and so it goes really way back. And if you look to, for instance, in Norway, where I'm situated, you have these examples of, for instance, when they discovered the fertilizer. Norway is very big on fertilizers. And this was a cooperation between a brilliant scientist and a businessman. So, and this is like, I guess, 200 years ago or something. So it's kind of the old way that has worked for many. But in this environment, it's almost like we've forgotten what used to work. And a lot of investors are just extremely short-term oriented. They don't have patience for the hard stuff, the deep tech side. They go for software because it's super nice returns, it's a scalable model and everything. But software is not going to help us on a lot of the core problems. So where are all these sort of deep tech investors? And this is sort of a frustration also. And most of these investors have never founded a single company in their life. They don't have this experience, and they try to vet you if you're the right entrepreneur or not, and they don't even have the qualifications to actually vet you because they haven't walked the road you're walking. So this is sort of my frustration on the investors' side. And there must be a better way to actually do deep techs than going down this venture capital route with people who don't want to take risk. They want everything proven. You need the product proven. You need the customers. Who's going to invest in the early phase when you actually want to develop and prove this stuff. And there's hardly any investor in that space. So what I've sort of seen over the last years, last decade now, is that you need to work with family offices and you need to work with experienced entrepreneurs. Those get it. And they're able to move in ways where VCs are not able. So this, for all my companies, this is what actually works. And then to your question, why? I think it is going back. So I did my master thesis actually on this very topic. Why do some entrepreneurs succeed, and what is the common mindset that they have that make them succeed? So basically, what do the best ones do better? And I was interviewing like 7 entrepreneurs who made it from zero to successful companies. And I was, fortunate enough to kind of sit down and have like 3-4 hour interviews with them and sort of in a structured way going over the mindset and see where are the commonalities, how did they actually do this? And there are a lot of things to kind of take home from that, but one of the key things is really that it's a team play. And a success in a startup, it's defined by the first 4 or 5 people you actually get on board in your startup, which of course means your co-founders but also investors actually. If you do a really good job on this one, then you have the fundament you need for making a success with them, and you have an amazing journey. But if you screw up on any of these first hires, or you get bad co-founders or bad investors, it's very hard to make a business out of it. So that was one of the sort of key things I took with me. And yet, despite this, I made a lot of people mistakes over the years also, because it's very hard to make a judgment call on this. What is the true motivation people have? Is it sort of egoistic things that they want power, fame, and glory, or money for themselves? Or is there a bigger purpose? And you need to kind of find the people with the bigger purpose, because the others, they tend to try to make their own situation better all the time, instead of thinking of this as a team. So you need team players, like true team players. And one of the things that I sort of really appreciate in the last decade now is how you can develop really trustful relationships, where you know that you have each other's back, and people don't try to exploit situations when they occur, because there are always ups and downs in startups. And people have to get accustomed to this, that this is part of the journey. There is ups and downs. You will get setbacks. That's how you learn. You need to experiment. You need to do this rapidly. And if you have people on the team that for every setback they try to increase their own position, it's just getting to be a nightmare. So choose your ecosystem and your co-founders and investors with a lot of care.
Certainly. I think this kind of trust is usually built over time. I know that you have a CEO that works with you at several companies already, probably because you were able to build this kind of trust and team together.
Yeah, so it's kind of sort of interesting to see that from the past also tend to like to work together. And so back in Innotech Solar, the solar company, David and Jerry, both of them were part of the top management, being CEOs in the company. I was the founder. I decided to be CFO from almost day one. And I didn't want to have this CEO position because I knew that it was going to be very challenging to build up this company. And so David was the second CEO and Jerry was the third CEO. And we had a lot of fun together. We really liked working together. And sort of coming into the Nanize story, so after my 2 exits, I had all these questions. What should we do now? I didn't want to sort of lean back and do nothing. I wanted to do really meaningful things. And one of the questions I had was why do surfaces get dirty? Well, it's such a stupid problem, but we're so accustomed to this. Like, that's how the world is supposed to be, right? But why? And this was back in 2019, and I met Dr. Kingsley Evu, who has a PhD in material science and specialty in nanotech. And I started throwing these questions at him, and it's like, yeah, but it's because we're using the wrong chemistry. And I was like, wow, that is a very interesting statement. What do you mean? Yeah, we're using all the technologies out there today are using the weak chemistry.
What does it mean?
So the weak covalent bonds. So you don't tap into the strong covalent bonds that is possible. So what this means is that, yes, you can have super hydrophobic coatings, but they wear out very quickly.
Yes.
So you have these amazing properties, but if a product wears out after weeks or months, it has no commercial value really, because no one is going to coat their car every 2 months, right? So I was asking to him that, well, but what's the problem with using reactive coatings to sort of achieve this strong chemistry? And I said, well, people can't handle reactive chemistry. But I'd been working in industrial setups before where we had a lot of nasty chemicals. So I knew that sort of this was possible to work with robots. So I said this to him. I said, yeah, but why don't we use robots? Why don't we sort of coat things before they leave the factory gate? So people don't have to touch it at all. You don't need to wipe your car if you want to have a car that you don't wash. And by the way, it's not lasting anyway because you don't have the right chemical setup. So I said, let's sort of rethink this problem and say that let's fix this on the factory floor instead, so that you can tap into the strength of the covalent bondings in these coatings. And that was kind of the start of Nanize in 2019. 6 months later, Kingsley was able to produce evidence that we had the most slippery coating in the world. And so the lowest coefficient of friction ever for any coatings. And the current record holder is Guinness World Records is a product developed by NASA. And it has 0.03 coefficient of friction, and our first tests were on 0.01 to 0.02, which is like significantly below NASA's product. And Teflon is like 0.04 to 0.06, so it's like well below Teflon even. And then because of this strong chemistry, you were able to have also something that is not only slippery, but is also very durable. And this we developed now. It's 5 years into this company, and we've filed 5 patents. We've solved this so we can cure this in seconds at very high volumes. It can replace Teflon and all sort of PFAS type of products, which is about to be banned in Europe and most likely also in the US. So all these forever chemicals, and if you go sort of into the details, it's like this carbon-fluorine bonds, which are creating this slipperiness of Teflon. All of that is about to be banned now because these chemicals accumulate inside our bodies and it causes health issues. So Europe is now proposing to ban all PFASs, but then goes all the products that also have a possibility to keep surfaces clean. Like your fry pan, or you have Teflon in fry pan, everyone knows that. But you have razor blades. You have all kinds of products that have Teflon, like functional coatings that have Teflon or Teflon-like products in them. And all of those need to find new replacements now, and new alternatives when this ban is about to be introduced. So we happen to be in a very good position with what we're doing with Nanize, and eventually maybe I can get that car that I don't have to clean, or we can have these surfaces that actually don't get dirty, just because you're asking the right type of question instead of just focusing on technology per se, like you have an innovation that, let's find a market for this, but really start with the core of the problem. Why do surfaces have to be dirty?
And here I have a question. When you mentioned finding a worthy problem, a good one, how do you define it? Because the question why surfaces get dirty can sound, silly in the beginning. Why surfaces get dirty? Well, that's just because the things are like that. From the other side, if you think about it, lots of products are using different coatings to keep them from getting dirty. There is like a huge industry around that. So how do you define a good problem that it's worth to be solved?
That is a very good question. For me, that is sort of something that I get really engaged about, something that I like this coating thing. I've been puzzled about this since 2002.
Wow.
But the timing wasn't right to kind of do something about it. When I founded my first company, I was at a tech conference and I saw this lady going, and she was a conferencier at this tech conference, and she went on stage with wearing a white dress, and a butler came with a glass of wine and they sort of accidentally spilled it on her. And all the wine was going off the dress right away. And everyone in the audience, it was like probably 500 people or 1,000 people or something. And everyone was like, complete silent, like what happened now? And that was like my intro to nanotech, and I was like, wow, this is the future. And then sort of after my exits, and it was like going back to 2018 2019, I was like, but where are all these clothes? My kids were small, and it's like, you have to wash a lot of clothes. Where are all these super cool products that that I saw the sort of glimpse of back in 2002. And why hasn't anyone solved this problem? So it's clearly not an easy problem to solve. And the multi-billion-dollar companies, of course, have tried to solve it in many, many ways. But it goes really deep into the tech side. So how can you actually solve the core of the problem so that dirt doesn't attach to surfaces? So that's not about just superhydrophobicity. It is about also having a product that can last for the long time and has the right chemical bondings to survive for the long time, that is scratch resistant and that protects these surfaces. So if you start to think about sort of where are functional coatings, and they're basically everywhere. And your car, or you have airplanes, or you have on glasses, on windows, on solar panels, they're really everywhere. But it's sort of kind of deep into the tech side. So we take these things for granted, and we don't sort of think about these as sort of problems, because this is just sort of how the way the world is. We're kind of biased because we're used to this being a natural problem. Who kind of asks about these problems? They're silly problems, right? But they're not silly. They're actually huge, huge problems. And to me, it was like a puzzlement. It's like, yeah, why? We have all these crazy good engineers globally. Why has no one actually solved this problem? Because it's so obvious that once you solve it, there's a huge market for it. And that goes into the other sort of startups as well. Usually it's a fascination of people. It usually starts with people. I see some really brilliant minds, and then they have their expertise, typically decades of expertise in an area, and maybe they're working on something that they're excited about, but sometimes it's sort of within that field I have some curious thoughts or some ideas, or we figure out sort of what are these worthy problems that's really meaningful to work on. And sometimes these people, they have the answers, that they know this, but they don't have the means and the fundament to actually do something about it. And once you discover these people, I get very fascinated, and it's possible to set up these trustful relationships where they know that I'm not here for a quick win or to exploit them or in any way. I want to do good. I want to help, and I want to see their brilliance shine, really, and then have a lot of fun, and of course a lot of challenges on the road, but sort of, yeah, so that's sort of my core or my sweet spot. It's finding these really worthy problems to solve together with brilliant people, and it's kind of my mantra for what I'm doing now in these days.
This is super inspiring and interesting. And I would say that your approach to finding a good problem is very different from what other people would think about it. Someone else would say, climate change is such a huge problem. People are dying from cancer, millions of people every year, and they are trying to fight these things. Do they fall under the definition of a worthy problem?
That's certainly sort of, well, energy is a case that is a worthy problem to solve, because with energy you can do a whole lot of very interesting things, and that's kind of a bottleneck for so many solutions. So obviously energy is a part of also the solution to climate change. If you can solve energy, you can solve climate change. Well, sort of people are dying from different things, so of course there are worthy things there. So I fundamentally believe there are a lot of worthy problems out there. Yeah, when you have your startups, and now I have these 4 startups, deep tech startups, does this mean something to you to actually solve this? Is it meaningful? Is it worth it? And that becomes very personal. And I guess there are thousands of sort of worthy problems out there. So there's no lack of worthy problems. But still, I see and I find that a lot of entrepreneurs are solving kind of tiny problems or unimportant problems. It's like, why not work on the important ones instead? Because it's as hard to solve the worthy ones as it's the less important ones. And maybe it's a better financial gains to do the unimportant ones, or to do an app, or to do a software. But it's like, yeah, but where is that bringing us? It's like, let's have some fun. Let's solve something that actually means something, and that you don't regret it after the journey, that this was just a way to get rich, or as most people, they don't actually get rich from entrepreneurship. So let's make sure that the journey is also enjoyable, not just sort of the end goal that motivates you, because it's a lot of hard work for every single startup. The risk is against you, the odds are against you. But with with experience, it is at least possible to mitigate some of these things and at least avoid some of these common traps. And I think one of the biggest traps I see is really sort of working on the wrong things.
It's a fundamental trap, I would say. If you don't have a good problem, all the rest that you will build on top of that just won't work.
Yeah, and it's the same as if you have an innovation and the core of it may be very good, like you're actually addressing a problem that is worthy. But because of your innovation, you put on this blinders. So instead of solving the actual problem, you start to care about your innovation and how to make this one happen. And then on the way, you see that there are other, because you work with this every day, you see that there are maybe other ways to actually solve the problem in a better way. So it kind of brings you back to the starting point. What is a worthy problem and how should you solve it? And that should be actually independent of technology. Because if you deploy sort of the technology bias, then your whole journey will be biased. And you're not open to sort of actually the best solution. And I think that is part of sort of, in the early days, of any startup, you need to really make an assessment of, is this a worthy problem? And what is the best way to solve it? And if you don't have a sort of an opinion about that, you really end up in sort of blindfolding yourself almost with all these assumptions that we all make. Like even I make a lot of assumptions. You have to. That's how our brains are working. But being aware that these assumptions might also cause a lot of troubles. And a lot of this can be done in the early days. If you do like 30 problem interviews with various stakeholders in an industry, you can learn so much. And what people normally do is they start selling their solution. But you need to stop that. And you need to actually go into problem interviews to really understand at depth what is the problem. And then, because people like to talk about problems, but they don't like to be forced into buying something. If you start to sell something, you don't get the information. But if you talk about the problem, people are very happy to talk about problems.
To complain, yes, this is such a problem.
But in that, there's also a whole lot of valuable information that you get because it kind of takes away some of these blindfolds. And the more you talk to people in the early days, the faster you actually learn what are the real problems. Because when we go into any sort of startup, we have our biases. The biases are hard because you believe something to be right, but it's actually not right. And it's very hard to say that, well, my biases are wrong, because that's how you perceive the world. So the only way to reset your bias is to go out and talk to, and that can be customers, that can be global experts or partners or investors, but you need to talk to someone. That is the way to kind of reset your mind on this and to figure out, are your assumptions correct? And on this path also, there are many business models that you can apply to solving different problems. And it can be like a subscription model, or it can be a hardware sale model, and these type of business things also matter in how you actually structure and set up things. And 5 out of 6 may be wrong, but the 6th may be genius. And it's all on the same technology and solving the same problem. So the business side is also very important to sort of how you structure these things. So, and the assumptions for one business model may be invalidated, but for the 6th one, it may work perfectly. So you need to have sort of multiple paths also to solving these problems in a business way, in a good way. And that's sort of coming back to sort of why I think the business side is also very important. Yes, you need to have a proper fundament. You need to have the right people on board. You need to get the investors or capital in to help solve this. And then you need to have the right assumptions and the right business in mind, that you're solving something that is worth it, that it can scale and it means something. And then you're probably on a good path. But it takes years to kind of develop this mindset and learn it in the brutal way. And so I'm trying to share some of this on LinkedIn and sort of in a pay it forward style, and to other entrepreneurs that maybe they can get inspired with some of my learnings the hard way. So, yeah.
Tacit knowledge. So let's go back to Nanize. Nanize, you had this idea of why things get dirty from 2002. So you've been nurturing this idea for a long time. Probably you were not thinking about it every day. Yeah, but it was sitting somewhere in your brain and you were like, So how did it start? How did it happen? You met this professor at some point and it was the aha moment? Or what is the story behind it?
Yeah, I met with Dr. Kingsley Evu in a completely different setting. And he was he was reaching out to me about an idea, and I thought the idea wasn't really interesting, but I thought he was very interesting because he had his PhD in material science and specialty in nanotech. So instead of I kind of left the other thing as I couldn't really find any motivation to talk about that, but I had a number of questions to him that I wanted to ask because I really wondered what were these. Why didn't surfaces why do they get dirty? Why is this such a hard problem? That's kind of the beauty when you talk to people with real insights and expertise. They can tell you the answers right away. Whereas a lot of other people with less insights and knowledge, they start to speculate or this or that. But people with deep competence, they usually tell you right away. This is the problem. And in Nanize's case, Kingsley said that, well, the problem is we're not using the strength of the reactive chemistry. So you don't get covalent bonds, which means that these products, these coatings, they wear out very quickly because they lack covalent bonds. So Teflon and all these other sol gel coatings or silicone coatings struggle with this weak chemistry. And you need to tap into the strong reactive chemistry to actually solve what you want to solve, Håvard. That's what he said. And then we went on almost like a 9-month process with lots of questions back and forth and research articles. And I read a lot of articles about nanotech coatings and super hydrophobicity and all these kind of things and durability. And then we founded a company 9 months later and decided to give it a shot. And I went in and invested in the early phase, got some grants. We had this proof of concept. And then we had, after the proof of concept, we had enough to start to talk to investors. And then I met David, who I talked about briefly earlier, who was my former CEO. And I asked him if he wanted to invest in the company. And I asked him if he wanted to have an operational role in the company also, because I was running another company at the time. And it takes a lot of effort to run a deep tech startup for sure. And my philosophy is I don't want to be CEO in my companies. I want to work with. I've been working with brilliant CEOs in the past, and I'm a really good founder, but I'm not necessarily a really good CEO for scaling things. So, and I've been fortunate to be working with these people. So I asked him if he wanted to be CEO in the company, and well, despite sort of maybe thinking no, and because he's retired, he had made a lot of 30 years in the solar industry, and he didn't have to work, but he thought this was a really cool problem to solve. So we kind of united around this, and he decided to go in as CEO. And then Jerry also decided to join, and Jerry built like a $2 billion portfolio for Suntech, which was the largest solar cell manufacturer in the world. David also used to work at Suntech as chief operating officer, responsible for some 20,000 employees. So these are like really senior guys. And we happen to like to work together. So then the four of us kind of teamed up in the early days, and here we are now 5 years later, and we have a very promising company, unique IP technology that can replace PFAS or Teflon, and can give us these surfaces. When Teflon gets a ban, we can come into that position and. We can finally. I can hopefully get this car that I don't have to clean, which was one of my annoying points. So it's very personal, right?
Yeah, and get also more kids who now don't dirt their clothes all the time. So it's very nice.
Wouldn't that be a great problem to solve? Huh? I bet a lot of people would love to see these clothes. I would, for sure. So it's a fascination sort of for many things, and it starts kind of with a curious mind. There's like questioning why does it have to be like this? What is possible? And this curiosity leads you unexpected ways.
I think this is kind of curiosity that kids usually have, because they don't have.
I feel like a kid. Come on, I'm 45 years old, but I feel like a kid.
This is amazing. This is a superpower, I think. When you are so open to the world that you don't have these preconceptions, and you're asking always kind of weird questions. For which people think like, come on, you're not 6. This is just how the world is.
And then sort of now with my own kids, it's I'm kind of reliving my own childhood because they are starting to ask all these questions. And I was like, I love these questions. And they're very curious. And, that is coming back to sort of the upbringing, that the mindset actually matters a lot. Because if you're allowed to ask these questions when you were kids, and I was a kid with a lot of questions, to the annoyance of my teachers sometimes. But I was a very curious kid, and I liked to figure out stuff. That's why Popular Science was my favorite magazine. I love to read about sort of all these new inventions. And if you can sort of, well, as you say, it is a superpower also. But most people aren't tapping into it because they're not used to asking these questions, because this is just how the world is. We're grown-ups, right? But it's kind of sad, isn't it?
Yes, I wanted to say that it's sad.
These people I'm around, they like these questions, and they like to sort of see solutions or find solutions where others only see problems, or that's the way it has to be. That's the way we have always done it, which is kind of, it doesn't mean that it has to be like this tomorrow. So having a bit of imagination about what a better future for tomorrow could be is, of course, so very important. And so you need to have a vision and a dream or somewhere you want to go, and have fun along the journey.
Absolutely. So don't see problems, see opportunities.
Yeah, which is also sort of centered in the very problem themselves. So every problem has an opportunity. It's by design. It's a problem. If it's a big problem, it's much better to work with it than if it's a tiny problem. So the biggest problems also have the biggest opportunities. It's really, really linked.
On your LinkedIn, I've seen that you mentioned serendipity. Tell me about serendipity. I think that this is a big thing for you. Tell me more.
For me as a founder, I decided to be visible on LinkedIn some four years ago. I decided to share my story, and this is kind of, I'm living in northern Norway. It's kind of on the outskirts of the world. It's not Central Europe or US or wherever, and I don't have a lot of people around me that sort of work with the stuff I'm working with, or it's not like a community. It's like an ecosystem here. So for LinkedIn, for me, has become sort of my ecosystem, where I find a lot of people with similar minds and similar ambitions and values. And yeah, I kind of created my ecosystem through deciding to be visible, deciding to write about my journey, and not for selling or anything, but sort of for connecting with people. So for many years, I've been sort of tried to have one new meeting every week with a new person. And then it happens that I find some really cool people, of course. Now, do you call that serendipity? Well, maybe yes, but it's also a sort of there's a strategy actually behind. You're allowing serendipity to happen because you're reaching out, you're connecting with people, you're talking to people, and then not every time, but sort of many times you find interesting people, and I get kind of fascinated with interesting people, and so some people call that they think that they are very nerdy, and some people probably think I'm very nerdy, but in my world that is a huge compliment.
Oh yes,
it's not
in mine as well.
Yeah, that's a huge compliment. You want to understand things, and you dig deep, and deeper than most people, and yeah. So I guess I'm a nerd, and I get very fascinated by other people who are also nerdy, or people who have very, very deep competence, yeah, so then when we meet, because I've decided I don't want to be CEO, it's also possible to run multiple companies at the same time. And that's what I happen to love to do. And we're having a lot of fun doing things that most people are not doing, and challenging things. And I think we'll see a lot of really cool stuff happening, and already a lot of cool stuff is happening with these startups, and yeah, more to come. There is a better way to start up deep tech startups, I think, and it doesn't involve venture capital, because that model is to a large extent broken, or it's not suitable for deep tech. And so to some extent it's almost like a startup studio where I can do all these cool things together with amazing people.
Who was your favorite inventor when you were a kid or a teenager? Whom did you like the most?
Inventor? Well, it was,
I don't know, scientist maybe.
It was Albert Einstein. It was Graham Bell. It was Edison. It was, I read about all of them. Or that my mother read about them to me. So I was very fascinated. Even Newton and Galileo Galilei, and all these are sort of big disruptors in our history, looking at their lives and their thinking and their mindset and what they went through. And that is kind of like a common thing that I realized also that right after their big discoveries, absolutely no one of these were appraised.
This is sad.
But what was common? Well, they got a lot of opposition. A lot of opposition. So where should you find the geniuses of today? Among the appraised ones, or among those who have a lot of opposition? Well, to me, that answer is obvious. You need to find these people that actually are opposed, and that's where you will find the next geniuses. And I think I happen to work with a few of them. I think they're absolutely genius in every way, and they have deep confidence in these areas, and we're able to have a lot of fun together.
Okay. So that actually is a very sound strategy. Go against the grain and look for people who are now facing an opposition and a pushback from academia or traditional industry to look for disruption.
And then it's very important. It must be people with good hearts. Mm-hmm. Of course, there are a lot of scammers out there, so I have no interest in working with them. But the people with honest and deep knowledge, with integrity, who face opposition, that is kind of the beauty. And you can kind of see this when people dedicate decades of their life to a certain problem or a certain area, and maybe it sounds too good to be true, or maybe, they have all these things working against them. Well, that catches my interest. And of course, many of these just sort of, it doesn't work out for whatever reason, but some of them it works out, and I get very fascinated, and you have this setting that is right to actually do something together. And well, that's why I have multiple companies now, because it is possible.
Of course, and you are a living example that this is possible. But also, I would say that I thought a lot about why all these brilliant inventors and scientists, people who are experimenting or whatever, were often not taken seriously. That's because there is an industry, a strong industry that is trying to defend the status quo of how it is right now. I mean, I'm talking a lot with biotech people, and I ask them, okay, academia, science, we think that it's so quickly moving and everything. So I said, no, not at all. Actually, if you come with your new discovery, it's super hard to push anything, because there are people who are well over maybe 80 years old who developed their own theories, and they're preaching them for 50 years. And now you come with your disruption, and they're like, what are you doing here, boy? Go away. And this is already a problem, so that the industry that should be supporting the innovation does not want to do that, because it will kill the industry as it is. There are ways how to fix that.
Well, this is kind of the innovator's dilemma. I think both for big companies that they have this inertia to do nothing because they want to protect things. And then you have this sort of social acceptance of what is approved or what is not approved. But as all these great scientists faced huge oppositions because they introduced new ideas, and humankind is resistant to new ideas. That's the very nature. They don't like change. And there's a lot of investments in the past, in the different ideas or concepts or businesses or pride and honor and whatever. And so it's hard to embrace new things, of course. But that's also the opportunity. That's why it's possible to bring new things to the market, of course, because even if it's hard, it doesn't mean that it's not worth it. It may be really worth it. So, it's, and how to get together the right people who can actually make things like this happen. And it takes special people with a special mindset, and with resilience, and who's completely okay with challenging the status quo. And that's not easy all the time, because you will get opposition yourself when you do this. People think you're crazy, and many people probably think I'm crazy. And I don't really care, actually. To me, that's sort of, well, I know what I know. I do what I do with integrity. I can stand for all the things I've been doing. And yes, I made mistakes, and it's very easy to be wise in the aftermath. But sort of, you always try to not make mistakes, obviously, but sometimes it happens, and then you learn from it. And then you move on stronger and more wiser to the next time. Knowing yourself and sort of leading yourself is also really sort of core to this, like leading your own thoughts and mind. It goes really deep, actually. When people are opposing you, how do you react? Are you let down because people don't believe in you? Well, many are let down. But you can't have that sort of vulnerability to yourself. So you need to actually manage your own mind also. And for me, it's like if an investor say no, it's like it's completely okay. You move on to the next one. And you need to expect maybe 100 no's to get to the 1 or 2 yeses that you need. And everyone that is saying no is basically disqualifying themselves for joining this journey. So it's not like you can't take this personally. And that they don't like you or they don't want to invest in you or whatever. They are not qualifying themselves to actually join the journey. And with this mindset, it just changes the game for you. Because, well, okay, if they're not qualifying themselves to join, well, let's find those who do. And instead of sort of thinking like, no, this was a rejection of me or the business or they didn't like this or whatever, because as an entrepreneur, you will get hundreds of no's. That's the game. So, but it's all about finding the right people, and you don't want the wrong people to join you. So it's actually a blessing that they say no. So you see sort of how you can really transform your mindset from what is ordinary to sort of take no as a disappointment, which is very natural and human to do. But actually it's not. It's kind of a gift because they're not qualified. They shouldn't join you, and they say no. The worst is kind of almost like getting a maybe, because then you have no clarity. But a no's are perfect, and then you can move on. So in this way, sort of leading yourself and leading your own thoughts and mind is completely possible. And of course, to do this, sometimes you need some good coaches or some people you can talk with. But to a large extent, you can lead this yourself.
It's especially valuable when you're trying to build something that no one have done before. When people tell you that this is impossible, and maybe for a while it is impossible, but then it maybe becomes possible. How to stick and stay true to yourself when all the world around tells you that, Håvard, it won't work. And you're like, no, it will.
No, and this is a kind of a key point. I think some wise people even said that impossible is just an opinion. It's not a fact. And look back in history what has been possible over the last 200 years. And it's almost like a stupid opinion. And it's more sort of, can you actually convince yourself that this is worth it and that this is possible? And if you can convince yourself and you're convinced, you can bring that conviction into all these meetings and you can convey that conviction. And then if people don't like it, well, so be it. Let's find in the next ones. Let's find those that ecosystem that actually supports you, because that's what you need. You don't want these skeptics in your ecosystem. It's like to try to do business with people who don't like what you're doing or try to put obstacles in your way for every corner. It's like, come on, why would you? So this kind of goes into the pitching or the sort of finding the right ecosystem or the right investors, which is extremely important. And what sort of support system are you building up around yourself? And when you have great people or with good hearts in your surrounding, then life just gets much better.
To wrap it up, tell me, what are the plans of Nanize for this year and how people can learn more and stay informed about all your beautiful work?
Well, so for Nanize, we will have some commercial breakthroughs now coming up in this year, and we're ready for scaling this one. So I think we'll see lots of cool stuff. How to follow? Well, it's kind of follow the companies or follow me or send me an invite on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to link up with brilliant minds or scientists and founders. Yeah, then I try to pay it forward. I think that's also a duty that we have for the younger generation to help them with our insights and mistakes and pay it forward to them. So I'm happy to interact on LinkedIn which is my main platform really. And then I try to share updates there also about the companies and that's my advice.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It was such an inspiring conversation, not only for founders and scientists, but also just for people who want to adopt a better, more positive, more confident mindset to be able to do amazing, nerdy, interesting things. Thank you so much for that. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Maria. Pleasure to talk to you as well.